You know, they started writing songs together in 1964. That doesn't mean that they're still going to be writing great songs together in 84 or 94 or 2004. Lennon and McCartney's productive period of writing together was very short. Elton John and Bernie Taupin's period was probably quite short. Even Bacharach and David went their separate ways and wrote with other people. Because these two individuals were still locked in the same band, it was perhaps difficult for them to find other writing partners. I mean, it's always said that they need each other, and in a way I guess that's true, but they also needed more than each other. The songwriting inspiration clearly ran out somewhere down the line.
Like in 1974, when he had first worked with Ronnie Wood, Richards began to look outside of the band for more inspiration. After the release of his first solo single, the Chuck Berry cover Run, Rudolph, Run, Richards began to work with a number of diverse artists in various capacities.
Keith always loved his heroes, you know, from Chuck Berry to Muddy Waters, so I think he found a genuine thrill in playing on records by people like Aretha Franklin and the Neville Brothers. You know, he never lost the fan within him. So by the 1980s, you know, World War III has broken out in the Rolling Stones between Mick and Keith, and he's still a music fan. So this is what he does. He puts himself about. You know, he's got a grip on his drug demons, so he's physically capable of doing this now. And he's up for it, and he's not getting his satisfaction in the Rolling Stones, so he looks for it elsewhere.
The diversity of the artists that Richards worked with indicated that he was still finding new sounds and new inspiration. Not only did he record with Bo Diddley, Willie Nelson, Bobby Womack and John Lee Hooker, he also worked with more avant-garde artists, including the inimitable Tom Waits.
When Keith worked with someone like Tom Waits, I mean, I think there was a real mutual admiration and respect there. These two sort of quite primitive and sort of intuitive guys with a really visceral sense of the power of music. When they came together, you know, it's no coincidence that one of the tracks they did was called That Feel. That's what it's saying, is, you know, you can lose everything, but you still have that feel. It's not specified what it is, but it's the feel in the song. It's just the power and poetry and earthiness of what guys like Richards and Waits do.
The fan in Richards was again evident with a feature film project that he had begun developing with director Taylor Hackford. Having inducted Chuck Berry as the first member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in New York in 1986, Richards chose to further celebrate his hero's work by forming the ultimate band to accompany him for 2 shows in the 60-year-old's hometown of St. Louis. Hackford filmed both the rehearsals and the performance, and Hail Hail Rock and Roll was released as both a live album and feature film in 1987.
I've been so disappointed in Chuck Berry's live gigs for years and years and years whenever I've seen him, because he didn't give a damn, you know. He just and if he made a mistake, he'd blame it on the band, you know. I mean, and he just wing it and get through, and he's got such a powerful personality that he's managed to get away with it. I mean, I know everybody's, you know, mad to take the gig on, and no doubt they said it to you too. But so I ordered the straitjacket, allows 6 to 8 weeks for delivery, and if anybody was going to do it, I wanted it to be me. Not so much a musical director as I got an S&M director. Social and musical director is a polite man. It's the S&M band, you know.
Making a tribute to Chuck Berry, the man to whom he probably owed more than any other single musician alive, was a labour of love for him. Even though he had absolutely no respect for Chuck Berry as a human being, he had this huge respect for his music.
I think the Chuck Berry movie is the most astonishing accomplishment, because he's not an easy man to deal with. He's a man who's used to, you know, for 5 decades having totally his own way, changing the keys of songs, switching songs, And there's a lovely moment in the concert where he's playing a song, they're in F, and he decides he wants to do it in G, and you can see him, he goes over to Keith and says, knock it up to G, and you just see Keith going, nope. And the look on Chuck Berry's face at that point, because clearly nobody has ever said no to him in his life, it's a priceless moment. It's a great movie, and he certainly gives Chuck Berry a better live band than he'd ever had before.
Richards would continue to work with other artists throughout his later career, guesting on albums by Ziggy Marley, Johnny Johnson, and in 1990 appearing on a solo album with legendary keyboardist Bernie Worrell.
You don't tell Keith Richards what to, play, have fun with it, and get his interpretation of what he's hearing and learning at the same time, because you never expect, because you don't know what's going to happen, and you take that gift that he received and gave to you and to the others that heard it, and go with it and be thankful. Glad to get away sometimes. And family, that's family, yeah, but enough of family, 'cause families argue. So yeah, he gets to do something else, man. His head can go, he can be creative somewhere else and have new information coming in, and him giving back information and coexisting with this new entity. And he has fun.
Yet in the Stones, the rift would continue throughout the 80s. New albums, such as 1983's Undercover and 1986's Dirty Work, were released, but Jagger had now totally lost interest in the band and was more concerned with pursuing his acting career.
He phoned me up one night in '84 saying, I'm at the Savoy, come over for a drink. This wasn't to interview him, this was to go and just hang out. Because, Mick was doing one of his films. So what's Mick doing? He said, probably dressing up like Fu Manchu or something like that. There was an element of resentfulness that Mick was doing movies, and I think the straw that broke the camel's back was She's the Boss, when Mick Jagger did a solo album. Now, Keith had always said, I ain't going to do a solo album because the Stones get all my best songs, so what's the point? Then Mick did that, and that was really what galvanised Keith into doing Talk Is Cheap.
Talk Is Cheap, the first of 2 solo albums recorded by Richards, was released in October 1988. Using many of the band who had worked on the Chuck Berry project, who he named the Expensive Winos, and including guest appearances from ex-Stone Mick Taylor, vocalist Sarah Dash and Bernie Worrell, it was seen by many as his most significant work of the 1980s.
I know he had fun, man. I wasn't there for the whole recording of the album, but the sessions that I was there, you could see it. On his own, doing his other thing.
Talk Is Cheap, which Keith did with a little group he got together, Waddy Wachtel, a few mates, and they were playing basic Keith songs, and basically it was the best Stones album for years. That was the common sort of comment in all the reviews.
Ladies and gentlemen, Keith Richards.
I did a long interview with Keith right around the time of his first solo record. He had famously said he would never make a solo record because he never wanted to be in the situation of deciding, do I keep this song or do I give it to the Rolling Stones? And so the idea that he was going to make a solo record was in itself kind of significant. But I think that was important for him. Important for him. It's hard to think of somebody like Keith Richards as needing confidence, but I think it really did get his confidence up. The way that earlier projects like doing the Chuck Berry movie, doing Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll, re-encountering somebody, working with someone like Aretha Franklin, I think getting his own band together and taking it out on the road meant a lot to him.
I'm not one of the people who thinks that the Keith Richards solo albums are absolutely great. But they are better than Mick Jagger's solo albums. And that's because Mick Jagger has these pop ambitions and Keith Richards does not.
Talk is Cheap is the sound of a man who, you know, really wanted to work with a bunch of guys who were really going to get into the music, you know, and it was a fantastic band. Jordan, Waddy Wachtel, Charlie Drayton, and so on. He really wanted to have some fun. He really wanted to, you know, record some music that came from his gut.
The Stones' next album, Steel Wheels, met with a better response than their previous two efforts. And this time the band concentrated on bringing their live act back with a bang. From now on, the Stones would be directing most of their energy on their gargantuan and often star-studded stage shows.
I think when the Stones reunited, you know, for Steel Wheels, you know, I think Jagger had gotten over whatever his fantasies about his solo career or, you know, his sense that he was better than rock and roll or the Rolling Stones. Keith had worked through the worst of his drug problems and had his own solo band and was, you know, ready to get back to work. And, you know, the Stones got back and, you know, as a live band, you know, I think have just been working at a very, very high rate since that time.
It was almost as if, like the Grateful Dead, they threw in the towel as regards making studio albums. You know, the Grateful Dead went years without making a studio record, and they just became a touring band. And in a way, that's what the Stones did. And they still touted themselves as the greatest rock and roll band in the world on the strength of touring and playing the old songs. You know, there are very few songs from the later albums that have taken their place in the core repertoire of the songs that they toured. So this is how they reinvented themselves. They're the greatest touring rock and roll band in the world.
Over the last 20 years, the Stones' concerts and tours have become progressively more ambitious and more elaborate. But as well as being defensive about their less impressive recorded works, they have had to shrug off criticisms that they were too old to be playing at a young man's game.
People talk about the Stones, you know, they look old. I just say, like, look, go to the show. You know, go see the show if you can go. And then afterwards, if you want to tell me, you know, that ain't, you know, that's not a great rock and roll show, whatever, we can maybe have that conversation. But if you think that, you know, because they're the age they are, that they can't play a great show, you're wrong. And I've seen this band now for over the course of 40 years, you know, on almost every tour that they've done. And the Stones are playing at a very high rate. You know, if that, you know, period of music means anything to you, you know, if seeing one of the great bands, you know, perform means something, like, you know, you should catch one of these shows.
Despite the resurgence of the band, at least as a live act, Keith has continued to work on projects outside of the Stones. As well as releasing a second solo album, Main Offender, in 1992, he also worked on a record that put the spotlight on a unique set of musicians unknown to the Western world. Richards had fallen in love with Jamaica back in the early 70s and bought a villa there in which he could hide away from the public eye. In 1997, Richards set up his own record company, Mindless Records, and his first release was an album he had recorded 2 years before in his backyard, of a Jamaican drumming collective led by ska legend Justin Hines, called the Wingless Angels.
He had a nice big house, Point of View. It used to belong to Tommy Steele. Yeah, so he's got a great house in Jamaica. He's got all the guys are coming up from the beach to jam with him because they know there's this rich rock star. Once they've stopped trying to rip him off and realise he's actually quite a nice bloke, he's got them working for him, and that's how the Wingless Angels started. And produced this album of hymns. But it was never given a big push. It was never like the window at Tower Records, Keith Richards, the Wingless Angel, because if any Keith fans buying it would have been horrified, you know, because basically it sounded like Raz Michael and the Sons of Nagus, you know, with these really, really grassroots Rastafarian outfits. But it was his dream to do.
Keith Richards loves music. And I think that all of the aspects of music kind of intrigue him. And so the degree to which these kind of, with the Wingless Angels project, I mean, I think the degree to which these kind of Anglican hymns sort of got transformed in this, in this island culture into this, kind of sinuous, rhythmic, but still very kind of spiritually ambitious music was fascinating. And I think, he was really taken with that and thought, well, I can get that out to people. I have, the ability to kind of organize this and let people hear this. So there was just a kind of, I think, genuine fascination. I mean, he loves Jamaica, and he loves all aspects of what that music is. But on the other hand, this sounds absurd, but there's a kind of very traditional English element to Keith. And I think the combination of those things and the sound of the Wingless Angels, I think, definitely gripped him. And that's why I think he was drawn to it.
Although his role in modern music may have diminished since his creative peak in the late 60s and early 70s, Richards still continues to captivate audiences both with the Stones and with his collaborative work.
I think Keith has never really lost it. I mean, the Stones' music has obviously gone through long periods of being very poor, when Keith has not had his eye on the ball. But, he's always come back with something. There's like one track on this album or a ballad on that album where you can still hear, undiluted Keith. And I think Keith, to this day, is still in touch with his muse, if you like. He really is like Muddy Waters in his last years. I mean, he sees no reason why he shouldn't be doing this. He's like an old blues man who still delivers, who still cares, who's still passionate about his music.
And as the years go by, Richards seems to become more and more vital in the history of modern music, one of the great, undisputed heavyweight champions of rock and roll.
I can't offhand think of too many, if any, musicians who have gotten more out of the cornball building blocks of rock and roll than Keith Richards. I mean, he somehow never cornballed himself. That's usually the people who believe in that stuff, they are very sentimental. Keith Richards isn't sentimental at all.
He's one of the top innovators. I put him up there with Freddie Green, Jimmy Nolan of James Brown's band. Freddie Green, of course, with the Count Basie Orchestra. I mean, there are great rhythm guitar players in jazz, country, blues, and he would be rock and roll, one of the great rhythm players of all time. I mean, there's certain leads that he'll be remembered for, too, and obviously his riffs. But they're so organic that they're really part of his rhythm style. His riffs aren't really lead or rhythm. Instead, they're really a composite of both.
He's everything. He brought everything. And he plays lead, rhythm, melody, all in one. He doesn't have to go, he doesn't need that. His solos are within the rhythm track. Now let me see how many people can do that. It's an art within itself. And at the same time, he's accompanying while soloing. And picking the spots and know where to do it.
Despite his years in the wilderness and his image as a hellraiser, Richards has also emerged with his professional reputation intact. A man of great honesty, with an insatiable love of music.
He commands a lot of respect, and justifiably. He's a very decent bloke, Keith Richards. He's not quite the person people imagine him to be from the image. He has a great sense of humour, very funny when he wants to be, and commands a lot of loyalty from the people who work for him. Much more so, I have to say, than Mick.
Keith's for real. Roots, Mom, roots. Soul, heart. He's one of the people. He's Keith. One of the people, not nobody. And once you think you're up there, oh, hi. You thought so. No, he's for the people, and he exudes that, and they feel that. people feel, man. They can tell, like babies. Babies can feel a grown up or and animals. They can smell you or you give off an aura. They know. They can feel it. And ain't nothing but love coming for that man.
He always kind of tells the truth in his own mad way. He doesn't deny his past, you know. Plus the fact that he's not just survived, but seems to be in a happy marriage and has 2 daughters who seem to be both lovely and happy and healthy and, you know, clean and focused. And, you know, everybody in the book that I wrote, especially the women, everybody loves Keith, man. You know, Marianne Faithfull spent 1 night with Keith and then spent years with Jagger. She seems to remember that night with more affection than she does all her time with Mick.
As an icon, too, Richards has slowly risen to prominence. Whereas he was once the quiet, hard-working kid in the corner, he is now central to rock and roll mythology. As the Stones soldier on, Richards has become one of the most identifiable musicians in the business. And he has re-emerged in the public eye again, thanks to actor Johnny Depp, who based his performance in the blockbuster Pirates of the Caribbean on the human riff himself.
Hey! You! Get away from there! You don't have permission to be aboard there, mate.
I'm sorry, it's such a pretty boat. Ship.
What's your name?
Smith. Oh, Smithy, if you like.
What's your purpose in Port Royal, Mr. Smith? Yeah, and no lies.
Why then? I confess. It is my intention to commandeer one of these ships, pick up a crew and Tortuga, raid, pillage, plunder, and otherwise pilfer my Weasley black guts out.
I said no lies.
I think he's telling the truth.
If he were telling the truth, he wouldn't have told us.
Unless, of course, he knew you wouldn't believe the truth, even if he told it to you.
You know, it's not an accident that Johnny Depp is playing Keith Richards in Pirates of the Caribbean, and everybody gets it. Keith is a pirate. Keith is, you know, Captain Danger. He is Scarface. He is, you know, Scaramouche, you know. He is a great figure.
In the final installment of the hit trilogy, Richards stepped in front of the camera to portray the father of Depp's character, thus introducing himself to a new generation. Despite the now faded relevance of the Rolling Stones, Richards is still an enduring icon.
Whether or not people listen to the music, it's what Keith said about Exile on Main Street. As a work of art, it slowly seeped into the culture, which is the blood image. It seeped, man, you know? And really, that's what Keith has done, I think, as some kind of an iconic figure who, at this point in time, is like the last standing remnant of a world that has disappeared. You know, Pete Townsend, God love him, is Pete Townsend. He's brilliant and difficult and, you know, he's Pete, you know? Keith somehow is rooted in something deeper for people. They recognize his authenticity. And, you know, this is the dumbest thing anyone's ever said. Authenticity is just something that you can't fake. And that's what Keith has. And that's what makes him different and special. And, you know, he'll have that till the day he goes. It's just who he is and who he's always been.
Kids love Keith Richards, the old guy, the way they love Johnny Cash, the old guy, because he promises them that they can remain authentic and true to themselves as they get older. And he symbolizes that usually chimerical possibility. You know, people who think that they can be like Keith Richards, I'm pretty vital for my age. Keith Richards is a miracle. How the hell is he still alive, given what he's done to himself? I mean, I'm not hardly the first person to say this. So you're not going to be like Keith Richards. He is a very, very unusual human being, just in terms of his fundamental vitality. Who knows what chemical miracle is going on in his glands in his brain? I don't have any idea, but it's something special, and when he does die, which I assume will happen, they should cut him open and try and figure it out.
With a career now in its 5th decade, Keith Richards stands alone in the history of rock and roll. An innovator, an agitator, a hellraiser, and a survivor.